That noise alone makes me not want to use the kayak. Now, I'm going to be honest, I sat in the car for about an hour humming and hawing about whether to do this trip, mostly just due to anxiety over the kayak. There's just something about it that always makes me feel a bit uneasy. I think it's just due to the fact that essentially you're vulnerable in it. If that sinks, it's not going to be a pretty time. I mean, I'd be safe. I've got my life jacket, Nix has hers, but there'd be a lot of expensive equipment probably going down to the bottom of the water, so that wouldn't be too nice. But eventually I pulled myself together and decided to head off to the island that I had planned. Thanks to all the skerries that were dotted about, the sea was nice and calm for us paddling in. The total distance was only about 1.5 kilometres from shore to shore. Only took about 40-45 minutes, and then the goal was in sight. There's always that wee bit of relief once you make it to your destination on the kayak. Anyway, it was time to set up camp. As much as it looks like a bothy, the building you see is actually just an old cottage. The island is uninhabited. It's sometimes used for grazing sheep, however, but that's it. At this time, there was no sheep on the island, so Nix pretty much had free rein, which was good. The island itself has a pretty small footprint on the internet. It's not that well known in most of the sites, so for that reason I won't be naming it. Watching the video, you'll see quite a few famous Scottish hills in the background and on the skyline, so you'll probably be able to figure it out. I'm sure it goes without saying, if you do find it and visit, make sure you don't leave any trace, pick up after yourself. You know, there's no sort of utilities on the island, so treat it with a bit of respect. Anyway, lecture over, sorry about that. I had a quick wander round. There wasn't much daylight left, with sunset being around about 4:30, and there wasn't much to see of that sunset either, so we returned back to what I'm just going to call the cabin, and had a wee seat and prepped for dinner, and started picking off all the ticks that Nix had started to collect. The island is no less beautiful at night as it is during the day, the clear water still sparkling in the night, splashing against the rocks, not another sound to be heard. The clouds were rolling overhead, allowing the stars to sparkle through every now and then, so I went out and captured a couple of images. Without having scoped out the area earlier, it was very much trial and error. I was quite happy with the result I got at this location. The rocks in the foreground just complementing the hills in the skyline and those stars sparkling away. It's quite a pleasant image. Nix, as always, just hangs about and waits. She tends to stay off the rocks a wee bit at night, but I know I can always trust her to stay where she's meant to. So we called it a night. I stuck the camera out to capture a time lapse, and obviously the gods up above decided, nah, sack that, have some clouds. Well, I might not have gotten the time lapse I was wanting, however, sunrise was looking very promising in the morning, so I grabbed my bag and headed up to the shore. Thankfully, it was only a couple of minutes' walk from camp, as you can see. I decided to use these flowers just growing out of this rock as a nice foreground element. Full disclosure, I totally forgot to change my ISO from the astro shooting last night, so the first half dozen photos or so are shot at ISO 1600. So, sorry about that, just ignore it. They still turned out okay, that's one of the beauties of the Sony cameras with that ISO invariance. I've used the rocks to zigzag up to the right then back into the middle, leading your eye up to the mountains in the background. Well, Nix wasn't being subtle, reminding me that we'd been up for a while and she hadn't had breakfast, so we headed back to camp and got a little lady fed. Got myself refreshed and cleaned up with the morning duties, and we decided to head off for the day and adventure around this island and see what it has to offer. While it's uninhabited, there are plenty of tracks around the island. It's worth remembering though, these are actually deer tracks and they've just been created by them using the same paths over and over, so they won't necessarily lead to anywhere interesting or somewhere you might think a person might want to go to, so it's worth keeping that in mind. Quick detour off. Nothing special with this image, however, it's just quite nice. Shows off all the skerries and the hills in the background. It'd probably been a quite nice location for sunrise actually. We eventually reached the highest point of the island, which gave a lovely viewpoint over the whole place. I couldn't really get a foreground object here that worked with the expanse of the background, so I just grabbed a quick handheld panorama. As I said, there's quite a few famous hills in that skyline, so if you've half a brain, I'm sure you can figure out where I am.
Nice. Let's go.
We continued heading west. I wanted to see what the other coast was like, mostly for sunset locations. It's very nice, lots of rocky outcrops, lots of crags, it's quite dramatic feeling. This was more of just a tester image to try out the location, see how it was going to feel The sunset was going to be over just the top right of where that image was shot. As you can hear, the wind's blowing pretty strong, and it is the middle of November. However, it was still unbelievably warm, so we were taking our time and just plodding along the landscape and reaching the almost tip of the west coast. I was a wee bit disappointed. There was quite a large fishery, just kind of spoiling the view a wee bit. It's still very nice, but I decided to just return. I didn't fancy trying to trek back across the island in the dark. Not so much of getting lost, more the ground itself has lots of small crags and streams running through. It's definitely broken ankle territory in the dark, I think. Getting back to camp was definitely a wee bit on the sweaty side and needing to get freshened up a wee bit. Nix was obviously feeling it as well and had a little nap. Feeling refreshed, I went down to the bay just to get a couple of snaps off, using a long exposure just to smooth out the water and see straight through it with the CPL filter as well. And the moon was looking very nice with a wee orange glow. The sun quickly disappeared and darkness fell. Thankfully the sky was a wee bit clearer than the night before. Not much, but a wee bit. So I headed back out and got a couple of shots. This was the one that I picked out as the keeper. The next day I was blessed with another nice sunrise, so I headed over to the opposite side of the bay from where I was camped. There's a lot of nice rock formations here that I'd wandered about the day previously. While I was getting ready, I was lucky and a local fisherman who was collecting his lobster pots went by, and I managed to time it just right as he was leaving the island area. Quite a nice wee shot. So the reason I chose this location was just the pincer-like shape of the rocks just directing your eyes up towards the hill, which has also got the sun rising just directly behind it. After sunrise, it was time to head back, so we enjoyed the beaches one more time, and returned to camp. There was another little fisherman just came out, so I grabbed a quick snap of him. This is my favourite photo of the trip. I always think it's the spontaneous ones that seem to just stick out. I just love the simplicity of it and how it's just a real life photo. So that marks the end of my stay on the island. Overall, I spent 3 days and 2 nights and loved every minute of it. I know I've not told you where it is. I have a belief of, by all means, make the content and show it, but exploring is half the fun, and finding these places for yourself just adds to the reward. But I'm going to leave that part of the topic there because it's a double-edged sword. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's definitely been my favourite trip so far. All the photos can be seen on my Instagram at 4pads. You can help support the channel with the coffee link that will be down below in the description. Liking and subscribe goes a huge way, and thank you for joining us in this adventure.